Well, hello everyone. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to our Center Court session on executive MBA programs. We're going to talk about how an executive MBA can advance your career. To delve into that topic, we have three alums from three great schools and three great executive MBA programs. We have in the house the University of Florida's Warrington College of Business. Darren Alvarenga will be representing Florida. We also have in the house UNC's Kenan-Flagler Business School. Liz Austin will be representing the school. She's a vice president of acquisition integration at LabCorp, where I get my blood drawn, and maybe where you get your blood drawn. And at UT Austin McCombs School of Business, we have Jacob Hall, who's a managing partner at Kendo Capital. Welcome all. Darren, let's start with you. So the Warrington College EMBA, it's a 21-month program. And my understanding is students meet for an extended weekend once every 3 weeks on the campus in Gainesville. There is a 1-week international study tour. And basically, there are 4 campus visits every term. What made you choose this program in the first place, and how did it fit into your career plans?
One of the interesting things is that I'm only a mile and a half away from the University of Florida, since I do live in Gainesville. And so that made, from a commute standpoint, the choice the easy decision. But as a 26-year veteran of both finance and banking, I knew that being able to really expand my knowledge set was important. And as I sat in the midst of COVID, looking at a computer for about 10 hours a day, it really dawned on me that I had a perfect opportunity at that time to do something that I've always wanted to do. About 5 to 6 years prior to starting the program, I went to an information session. And at that particular time, I just didn't feel it was just the perfect moment. However, in reflection during COVID of so many people who may have been waiting on their perfect moment and passed away, it really dawned on me that, either I do it now or maybe don't ever do it. And and so at that moment, I said, you know what, no longer will I sit on the sideline and wish. I'll go ahead and get this process started. And in the midst of COVID, began the program, which has yielded great results and a wonderful post MBA existence.
Great. And, I think your experience is common to many, who kind of wait around. They're thinking, oh, should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? Oh, the price seems very high. I don't know how I'm going to balance my work and my personal life with this. And they kind of delay. And then you pull the trigger and then you wish you had done it earlier, probably. Am I right, Darren?
Oh, so definitely you're correct there.
Yeah. And we have, of course, Jacob Hall from the McCombs School of Business. That program is really interesting. It's 1 class weekend per month, Thursday through Saturday, on the campus, which is a 5-minute walk from downtown Austin. There are 7 executive MBA immersions, which makes it kind of unique in some way, including immersions in New York, Washington, D.C., and Dallas. And then there's a 6-day global immersion. Jacob, how did you get into the program? What was sort of the driving factor for you to do an executive MBA at McCombs?
So I unfortunately was not a mile away from the campus. I'm actually based in Houston, so it was a little bit more of a commitment, I guess, on my part to get over there. So I was able to evaluate a pretty wide range since I was going to have some travel involved in which executive program I participated in. My original intent was actually to enhance my career and grow vertically. I was also enrolled kind of during the time of COVID, started in 2020. And originally went into the program with the intentions of pursuing further growth inside of the organization which I was in, which ultimately I'm sure we'll get to it later on during the course of the Q&A, but pivoted a little bit post MBA in a very happy, I guess, and fortuitous way as a result of some of the learnings and the experience that I had there. But really had a great opportunity to be at the University of Austin. I evaluated several different programs, and as you mentioned, it's very close to downtown Austin and just a beautiful campus and a great energy there on campus and in person. And so was just one of the many factors that kind of led me to pursuing my EMBA there.
Great. Now, UNC Kenan-Flagler Business School has actually two programs, one in Charlotte, and then the one on the main campus in Chapel Hill. It's an evening program. There are evening weekly classes. There's also the students come together for a 3-day weekend orientation in the beginning of the program, then twice during the program for 3-day impact weekends, which are offered alternately between Chapel Hill and Charlotte. And so, Liz, I'm wondering, did you do the Charlotte program or the Chapel Hill program?
I did the Chapel Hill evening program.
Perfect. So tell me what led you there.
And hopefully this will speak to some of you, but I was one of those individuals when I went to college. I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do, changed majors more times than planned, and ended up getting into a healthcare business development type of job out of school. And just, about 5 years, probably 4 years after working in the healthcare field, I knew I wanted to stay in healthcare, but I wanted to kind of branch out into something outside of the sales area. And I had heard about the UNC program, and so decided to apply and ended up loving the experience. Again, it was 2 nights a week, 3.5 hours, and then we would go in for 3-day weekends if we chose to do one of the credits or classes that was completed over a weekend. But the majority of the work was during the week. And it completely changed the trajectory of my career. The job I got out of it, actually, after school, the job I started was as a result of one of my classmates. And so, yeah, it was a great experience.
Yeah, that's, I have to say, I've met a lot of executive MBA alums who found a new opportunity through a classmate. And true enough, the interactions and relationships you develop with your classmates tend to be the real parts of the program that endure and are oftentimes more useful than learning the basics of accounting, finance, marketing, strategy, or whatnot. Liz, I wonder if you can go into a little more detail about the learning experience. I imagine that doing that evening, twice a week class session grind, I'll call it a grind because, you're working all day and then you have to go to class. How hard was it? Or were the classes so invigorating and you loved your classmates so much that you really look forward to it and you wish it didn't end?
In full transparency, I'm sure for everybody, it depended on the class. Some of them I had a more natural affiliation for than others. And so I was very fortunate, though, that I did it at a time in my life when I had fewer responsibilities than I would have had now, for example. And that isn't to say I had plenty of classmates that did it who had kids and a lot of other things going on. I think for me, it was manageable because of the point in my life. I was much younger than I am now. I graduated in 2007. And so when I had started, I think I was so excited to be doing something that was going to lead to a new career that it was worth the investment that I was making. And I know we joked, but some of the people from class are still some of my best friends in the world. We have a monthly get together we do every month at a local brewery in the Raleigh area. And it was last week. And depending on the month, who all shows up and who still lives here, I'm actually going out. My husband and I are going out with another classmate and his wife on Saturday night this coming weekend. So I was one of those lucky people who had a really good experience with classmates, but also found a career change out of it as well.
Yeah, that really tells you a lot about the program and how well bonded the students are. And I know it's a real cohort style program where everyone is going through the classes at the same pace and with each other. So you allow those bonds to actually develop and grow deep. Darren, I wonder from you, give us a sense of the learning experience you went through at Florida.
The kind of piggybacking off something Liz mentioned, that how it varies from class to class, the that learning experience. One thing that stands out to me is really how collaborative it was here at Florida. That it's not about wrong or right in the classroom, but it's truly an exercise in academic exploration when it comes to interacting with both the professors and your cohort, and mind mapping and going really through the process with each and every class. And in some classes, you do struggle. You know, I vividly remember how managerial accounting caused me to lose my hair, but you know, I do save a lot in haircuts now as a result. But but in other classes, I was able to benefit from being a leader based upon my knowledge set that I brought to the table. And that collaboration really allowed me to get a better understanding from a holistic standpoint what the program, how the program would benefit me, and at the same time allowed me to really employ some of those teachings further down the line when I did pivot in my career.
Right. Jacob, how was the learning experience for you? You had the commute to deal with.
Yeah, I think the commute going into it was definitely something that was top of mind and that I was a little worried about. But after getting into the program, turned out to kind of be a non-issue given the amount of time that you devote towards your studies and towards, you know, extracurriculars and things, working with other people. So for me, that turned out to not be probably as important as I worried that it would be up front. But just kind of echo something that Darren touched on that I put in my notes whenever I was reflecting on speaking today. I also found it to be a very collaborative environment at McCombs and at UT, and that was much different than my undergrad experience. I was in engineering. I was a mechanical engineer for my undergrad, and I found it to be very competitive, hyper competitive at some points. And so it was pleasant surprise to find a more collaborative environment where you're working together closely with other people and where everyone is benefiting from the shared experience and knowledge of the group. And as Darren mentioned, also there's different classes where one person may have a little bit more exposure or experience, but that kind of comes together and coalesces in a really nice way to enhance everybody's learning experience. And so I think as far as the in-classroom work, that was a very big part of it. I also tried, probably didn't put as much time or thought into the activities outside of class and the social aspects that Liz talked about and the relationships that would be built during that. But I think that turned out to be one of the best takeaways from the program as well, was the lasting relationships with other professionals that were at similar points in their career that you could have good, long, meaningful discussions with. And we also had some extra activities to do, kind of like mini consulting projects and things along the way that were outside of the regular classroom environment. And I found those also to be helpful because it let me dive into something with a relatively low risk of failure, if you will, because you're getting exposed to something that's not your normal course of work and not at your normal job. So I found a kind of a mixture of different learning opportunities that helped to make the experience overall very valuable.
Yeah. Now, Jacob, I wonder if you could identify 3 highlights of the program that still resonate with you. This is one of my favorite questions to ask, because I think it reveals a lot about the programs when you look at them in depth and gives you a sense of what it would be like to attend the program. So Jacob, what would be the 3 highlights for you out of the program?
I think definitely the people, which we've touched on already, in those relationships, super valuable. I think that the business discussions that take place both during the course of the class and also on breaks and after class, there's not really anywhere else that I've ever experienced where you can find that much experience and that many people kind of focused on the same thing together at the same time. Very like-minded people in the sense that you're all interested in furthering your business pursuits and learning more together. And so I think that would probably be the second one, is I've just never found a more engaging group of conversations to have along business. And if that's something that you enjoy, definitely very, very fruitful in that way.
And probably so willing to share with each other, I might add.
Absolutely, yes. Not as competitors, but really as collaborators. And I think probably the third thing was that it really, for me especially, changed the way that I think about the world. And so I think that going into it, I was very focused on the knowledge that would be gained from the classes and was looking at it from a maybe a little bit going back to the engineering background, thinking of what knowledge would be taken away. And I think that to use a little bit of a cliche, you didn't really learn what to think, but you learned how to think and how to do analysis and how to identify different ways of looking at problems or opportunities that are out there in the world. And so I would say that it really kind of rewired the way that my brain works to a certain extent, and the way that I approach challenges, the way that I look at opportunities and try and dig a little bit deeper whenever you're looking at things in the world.
Yeah, those are three great takeaways. Darren, how about for you?
For me, what stands out, a couple of stand out. The first would be my background is a bit of an entrepreneur. So I had two companies at the time when I began the program. And so being able to employ some of the ideas or the learnings real time in my companies really impacted how I felt, not only about the program, but just how I felt in general as an entrepreneur, and being able to take those concepts, test them, and to be quite honest, at sometimes questioning what the professor was teaching, whether it was truly that way in the real world. And in classes such as organizational behavior, those concepts, being able to use those in my organization and see the results and the change that came as a result really was a highlight of my learning. And I did that throughout the program. So I can pick a number of classes where I took one thing from that class and used it and was able to see some tangible results in the business. So I would say that's probably the one big thing for me. The other was part of our international immersion. We did travel to a country in South America. And as part of that trip, we were able to sit in on meetings at certain companies and being able to see exactly what it is they do, but also be able to add value by sharing ideas of what we think could help them with their challenges. So those stood out for me and continues to stand out each and every day.
That's great. Liz, what are your three things that you took away from UNC Kenan-Flagler?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things was the professors were excellent. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Tar Heel, diehard, which I am, but the professors really were. I mean, the level of real life experience they could provide, how they could translate it into the case studies. I mean, I still remember one we did on a pharmaceutical company that years later, sort of everything came to fruition that we had sort of discussed in class. Like, I think the real life application that could be applied based on both the experience and their ability to teach. I think that was a big thing. Darren stole my international one, so we can address that. But that was one of the ones I was going to mention too, is
Where'd you go?
Eastern Europe. So I traveled to Eastern Europe on the abroad trip and had a similar experience that Darren had of being able to see how the businesses were being run. We weren't sitting in so much in meetings, but we were more having the opportunity to speak to the people that were running these businesses and say, tell us a little bit about what makes you successful. How do you drive strategy? How does entrepreneurship apply to the business that you're running? And it was a really great experience to, again, apply the principles from the classroom into a real business setting internationally. And then I think the one other thing I noticed was that team dynamics can really drive how productive anything is. And whether or not this is at work or even in the classroom, you all get put into teams, right? And I would assume that in most schools, this would be the case. And I think sort of helping any team drive positive team dynamics is going to result in how productive or unproductive it is. And that was one of the major things I think I took out of it.
Yeah, that's great. I wonder if you can identify maybe one or two courses that you took that were really meaningful to you. Liz, what would they be?
I think there was a marketing and branding course that we took. I don't forget the name. I don't remember the name of it. I'll be honest with you, but it was I remember it was one of the later classes we took, and the professor would get so excited that he would be running up and down the aisle like during class as issues would get raised, and was obviously so passionate about the items that were getting addressed in class, and it never left me, like a lot of the principles in there. And then we did one on sustainable enterprise. It was actually a 3-day weekend course that I took, talking about ways to apply sustainability to successful business. And it was great.
Darren, how about for you? You have a couple of courses that you remember and were meaningful?
The most meaningful is change management. Being in the middle of COVID, thousands of companies across the world were experiencing change, and being able to navigate that and was definitely something that was top of mind. but seeing it real time and being able to engage in that process really changed how I looked at enterprises in general, and impacted how, from then on, how I looked at that leader to team member interaction, and really has allowed me to scale my companies. So went from 2 companies to 4 companies across the Southeast right now. And a big part of that success it was on change management and how to engage those employees, so they understood not just why we're doing what we do, but why they should do what we'd like to do.
Jacob, how about you?
Oh, that's a great question. I think probably the first one that I'd have to mention would be a private equity and venture capital course that I took, because I took a pretty hard pivot. I was in operations leadership and in the energy industry, and now run a small private equity firm. And so I would say that that was the initial thing that lit the spark of interest for me and made me really dive into that and start to explore it further. So for me, that was a hugely impactful class that changed the entire kind of direction or course of my life going forward. And then I think there's another one that we had that was called financial statement analysis, which sounds very dry, boring accounting. But the way in which it was delivered was more around digging into the things that aren't said whenever you're looking at a financial statement, or kind of reading between the lines, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of challenging that went on in that class to say, there's the things that are printed, but then there's also the information that's not said. Has helped me a lot, not just in evaluating public companies, but also in the work that I do now in order to evaluate smaller private companies and try to think about the drivers behind the results that companies achieve, and the things that are both said and unsaid in that. So those were probably 2 really impactful classes for me that I think I use very frequently, even to this day.
So it's interesting to me that 2 of the 3 of you are career changers. And Darren, you were an entrepreneur and you stayed an entrepreneur, even though you've expanded the number of businesses that you're running. But for the career changers, Jacob and Liz, how did the program help you make that transition into a new role? I mean, was the career management center involved? Was it really your classmates? Was it a faculty member? What made the sort of the light bulb go off and say, you know what? I need a change. I need a new challenge. I want to do something different. Liz, let's go with you first.
I think to me it was the exposure. I think Jacob mentioned this earlier. The exposure to people in different industries that are all sort of driving towards career advancement, or to learn more, become more of an expert in their field. You sort of, at least for me, it was like even learning about companies that I'd never even heard of, fields that I didn't know, or sort of had moved along the trajectory that as far as they had, right? And so I think for me, it was opening my eyes to things that were out there. So the company that I got pulled into, I had literally never heard of, and they were about 10 miles away from where I live now. And I had never had an experience with them. I wouldn't have known anything about them had this individual not been working there from the class. And so I think just learning more about different industries and people's experiences was a big part of what helped there. And then also just honestly, just having a better background in business. Like, I was not an undergraduate business major. And so I think just to understand the business world a little bit better through the classroom was also helpful.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because I do think that many people, they get into a career and they follow it often in a narrow discipline, perhaps, and in one industry. And then you get into a class like this and you see just, widens your aperture. You see how many different possibilities there are out there that you never even imagined or thought about before. And suddenly you're living through some of them vicariously through your classmates, which I think really broadens your perspective on, well, I could do this, I could do that. And it probably gives you a little itch to want to change something, right? Now, Jacob, what was it for you that sent you into private equity from your previous role?
Well, definitely some of the things that Liz said, I can really resonated with me, because kind of the same thing. There were things that I got exposed to that had never even entered into my mind, never was a consideration. I actually entered the program with the intention of being a career enhancer. And although I had done some entrepreneurial things before, was definitely focused on achieving one thing out of the program, and through a little bit of serendipity and some good circumstances, was able to completely pivot as a result. But I think kind of to piggyback along some of the things that Liz said, exposure was probably a big piece. I also think that the environment that's there is an environment that encourages you to think, to use a cliche, outside the box, or to think differently. And there's a little bit of a buzz that's there whenever you're going through this EMBA program, in order to analyze things and think about them maybe differently. And you're being exposed to new things all the time. So you are looking at those opportunities in a way that maybe never even occurred to you that might be a fit. And for me, it was a little bit of an awakening, maybe piece by piece, and a little bit of a light bulb moment of where I figured out, wow, there's this diverse background of experiences that I've had maybe don't fit this corporate career path as well as I thought they did, but there's another place where I could use all of these skills and experiences in a much better fashion than I ever even knew was imaginable. And so I was able to tap into some of the resources that were available, because about halfway through the program, I was no longer really looking to further my career internally. I was able to utilize the career services department, though, in some other ways versus just the traditional helping you with a resume or interviewing skills. I was able to kind of leverage those resources they did some seminars on value proposition and on branding, personal branding, and telling your story. And all of those things are very important, especially whenever you want to branch out on your own and do something entrepreneurial, being able to communicate with others what your purpose or your mission is and what you're trying to do. And so I think that those resources were still helpful for me in a more entrepreneurial pursuit, even though it wasn't necessarily following the same career path that I originally intended whenever I entered the program.
Right. And Darren, I wonder if the opportunity of going to school and seeing different people doing different things broaden your perspective on what kind of companies to launch, because you said you now have 4 companies instead of 2. Did you start companies that were outside your field of interest when you entered the program?
Great question, John. I actually worked in corporate banking during the time I started the program.
Okay.
And the companies I had at the time were more indulgent experiments than anything else. Similar to what Jake mentioned, during the program, it really allows you to then evaluate where you fit. And so during that experience, it really opened my eyes, where I understood not just what I was doing at the time in corporate banking, but also made me appreciate the possibilities of what I could do with my companies. And so that's really where the pivot, it really was the impetus for the pivot that occurred a year after graduating, where prior I knew a little about a lot, and afterwards I knew a lot about a lot. And so, it was almost inevitable for me to then go the entrepreneur route fully at the end of the program.
Now, how did you handle sort of juggling your professional life, your personal life, and your now higher education life? And how difficult was that, Jacob?
I think that that's probably one of the most challenging things, especially at the start of the program, because you're taking on a whole new set of responsibilities and obligations. And it's something that's a little bit unique if you're in an executive or a professional program, in the sense that you're still trying to carry out those responsibilities and do the best job that you can for your day job. But then you have these other responsibilities too. So I would say that the first semester is pretty rough. It takes a little while to really get your flow and figure out. I think there was a lot of people that went through some emotional roller coasters as they were trying to find the balance of work and life and school. But usually by the end of that first semester, I think most people settled into a pretty good routine and scheduling process that worked for them. I think for me, one of the most important things was to be on the same page with my spouse before I started the program, because I knew that this was going to be a pretty significant sacrifice, not just that I was making, but also that she was going to be making in order to go through this. And there was also a limited amount of time to take advantage of all the resources and the learning opportunities that would be there. And so I think being on the same page with your partner up front, if that applies to you, is very important, because you can, otherwise I could see how that could go astray. Luckily for me, I had a lot of support internally, and a lot of things got taken care of behind the scenes that, thankfully I didn't have to worry about, and that enabled me to really focus and lean in hard to the program and to the learning opportunities and the relationships that I was making. But I think that it's definitely a challenge, and the more you want to get out of the program, the more time and effort you'll have to put into it, and probably the more rewarded you will be for the experience. So knowing that up front and kind of putting those priorities in place in advance of the program will ensure that you probably have a much better experience there and get out of it what you're hoping to, by having everything kind of aligned beforehand. And I thought that I gave up on all free time and just really didn't have much of that going on during the course of the program. Afterwards, you think that you're going to get this gigantic chunk of time back, but then all of a sudden it seems like the time vacuum is filled very quickly with all these entrepreneurial pursuits that you want to go and kind of exercise the things that you've learned now that you're out of school. So it's been an interesting progression after school as well.
Liz, did you have a similar experience where that first semester was pure hell, and then you managed to figure out how to navigate through the rest of the program in a more balanced way?
I mean, I think again, it depended. What my experience was, because of the phase I was at in my life, I think it was probably not as much of a juggle as I think it would have been had I had some additional responsibilities at the time, right? Like I was, I did not have children yet and things like that, which is a wonderful experience, but obviously adds another element to balancing your life and your classroom time, right? So I think that my experience was a little bit probably simpler to manage, I think, than dependent on the person. I do think that a few things Jacob said are really important. One, the piece about getting your time back, I agree completely. Some of that is a function of diving into the new pursuits. And I think some of that is that, you have to be the one to mow the lawn again because you don't have class, twice a week at night or whatnot, right? So you're picking
Bring back school.
Yeah, exactly right. But I would say another thing is to go in with your eyes open. I think that's the reality. Is like, I think to think, oh, well, no, I'm sure I'll find the time here. I'm sure I can squeeze it in there. I think you just really have to go in with your eyes open. And I think whatever program you choose, going and doing your homework ahead of time and sitting in and on panels like this or sitting in on different program overviews is really critical. I know, I'm not sure what Jacob and Darren's experience was, but I had tried to go to a few panels at a few different schools and just found that the energy for this school was the right one for me. And I think that itself is going to help you figure out how to manage it. Because if you do your homework, then it's sort of set up to fit to your personality and your lifestyle, right? So I guess those are what that was my experience. So I don't know about Darren, but
good advice. Darren, did you learn any tricks in terms of balancing life and work and education?
Similar to Jacob, sitting down and having those meetings with stakeholders, your spouse, your children, your boss, and in my case, I also had to do that with my business partners. Really laid the groundwork for an easy transition into the program. Additionally, one of the things that I found very helpful was to make the program the core of my week, especially leading up to a class weekend, and then build everything around that. And it made it all fall into place. And like everyone has mentioned, that first semester will be challenging because it's a bit, in my case, 28 years of being out of school was a very long time. So it was like a freight truck, being hit by a freight truck the first couple of weeks. But once I understood that, hey, whatever thoughts I had going in, it will be different. I will have to make the time for this and make this a priority. And as a result, it worked out very well by the second semester.
If you had to identify one beneficial thing that you learned during the program, what would it be? Liz?
I think that you really never know until you look at new avenues, until you investigate new careers, until you learn a new area. You don't know where your life is going to end up, where your career could end up. It's never too late to take a right turn. It's never too late to do something new. And I think that becomes very clear as you learn new things in the classroom. I've never met anybody who's gone back to school in a program like this and says, wow, I really wish I hadn't done that. So I think that's the biggest thing, is it's really going to expand your view. And I think that was my experience.
Yeah. Jacob, the most beneficial thing you got out of it?
I think kind of like Liz, it expanded my view. It's a mind expanding experience for you, and if you lean into it very hard, it will change your life. I think in ways that you can't even possibly understand or imagine up front. You think that it's going to do one or two things for you, but it'll probably do far more than that if you're present and if you're really there for that experience. So, McCombs has a saying that they say, "What starts here changes the world," and to me, that sounded like a really cliche thing whenever I started. And then after being involved in the program, it's true that no matter which program you choose and the one that's the right thing for you, you really can go on and take on a lot bigger challenges than you probably ever thought before, and in areas that you may have never looked at before. And so I think that the way of thinking and the processes that you have for your brain afterwards that's the most valuable thing that you'll take away from it, because you'll carry it with you in every experience, both personal and professional, from that point forward.
Darren, your big takeaway?
How it ties past learning with new learning.
Hmm.
Coming from a background of finance and banking, I was not very knowledgeable about things in that realm. The other courses really tied everything together. So I can think of it as knitting like the perfect blanket, because when I went in, there were holes in my knowledge, which made me not as proficient to the things that I wanted to do. And having those pieces fill in the gaps really made it so much easier for me to move confidently into the next stage of my career. And then in general, by having the right people add into that blanket, it really resulted in a fabulous masterpiece of knowledge, you could say.
Love the metaphor. Love it. So Darren, I wonder if you might identify one thing you now know that you wish you had known before you started this program. What's the one thing you wish you had known? Because it might be something that someone out there who's watching would like to know.
I would say the doubt of being too old.
Ah,
if you've ever doubted that, it's been so long since I've been in the classroom, this will be too hard. To really put that aside and have that leap of faith, it's amazing. I analogize it as, riding a bike. The only difference is that because you're older and wiser, you now know the importance of the helmet, the knee pads, and the elbow pads. And so really being confident to say, this is something that I can do and I will do, because I would say if there's one regret with this program, is that I did not do it sooner.
yep. And I bet you weren't the oldest person in the class.
Second oldest. So as far as from a school standpoint, yes.
Liz, what do you know now that you wish you had known before you started your executive MBA program at Kenan-Flagler?
Well, hopefully a lot, because it was a while back. But one of the main things from the class or the program is just, I don't think I really understood the reference I had before to the importance of the dynamics of a team, the contributions of everyone in it, understanding where people's strengths and opportunity areas are, and sort of leveraging those to either create a better product or give people windows to develop themselves. I think that when you have people all with the right attitude who come in, they can all leave better than they came in. And I think you hear these cliches, but I think it's really true in these group dynamics that you experience in the classroom. And it applies so directly to like a work environment.
Yeah. Jacob, how would you answer that question?
That's a great question. I think that for me, it would probably be the value of your time and how you spend it, because you got to see kind of vastly different outcomes, both pre and post program, and then also the time that's spent during the course of the program. And I think I went into it thinking, and I alluded to this earlier a little bit, that it was primarily focused on the hard skills of the educational piece. But there were so many other ways that you could spend time as well as that in order to pick up extra things through the program. And it also, I think, teaches you to be much more intentional about the way that you spend your time post-program, because the 2 years while you're in it goes by very, very quickly. Whenever you're in the middle of it, it feels like, wow, this is, very challenging, but it goes by so fast. And so I always try and tell people before they start the program, like be thoughtful, be intentional about the way that you spend your time during it, and lean in as hard as you can. And then post program, that's the time to really take those learnings and the experiences and the relationships that you have and use them to accomplish whatever things you want to do to make the world a better place or make your life a better experience, because you've built on all those skills. So I think the value of time and how to utilize it can never be understated.
Given your answer, I wonder if in fact you felt you had the time in the program to just take a break, to be introspective, as demanding as these accelerated executive MBA programs are and as rigorous as they are. Did you also have the time to sit back and reflect on your life, your career, your personal development in a way that was valuable? Or was it such a fast pace and you're grinding it out and you're rushing off to work and then you're going home that you really didn't even have the time to be introspective about your life? What would you say?
I think that I did. There were times it was kind of a little bit like a sine wave. You had times of more activity and times of a little bit
Yeah,
reduced activity. And so I tried to be thoughtful about, there are times that you really needed to lean into classwork or a lot of assignments or group work. But then there were also some times where you're able to take a step back and enjoy some of the social events, get to know the cohort, learn from them. One of the big pieces for me of choosing a program was to find a very diverse student body. And I don't just mean like visible diversity, but diversity in background of experiences and in industries and stories. And so I think that for me,
sure.
you found those opportunities along the way. And it's very natural that you're thinking about how those apply to you during the middle of that. As you're learning something new, you're constantly looking. And I think Darren mentioned this earlier, like where it was kind of like a feedback loop of he was applying it to his own entrepreneurship and into his own experiences. And so I do think you get that opportunity. Some days it's a little bit more survival mode, and other days it's a little bit more introspective. But I think that it kind of ebbs and flows throughout the course of the program.
Yeah. And each of you clearly had enough time to think that what you were currently doing, you didn't want to do anymore. So it did lead to a reevaluation of your career trajectory. Um, Liz, I wonder what advice you would have for someone who years ago was like yourself, looking at these different programs, thinking about them, and wondering if this was the right move for you, number one. And number two, when you decided that it was the right move, what advice you might give to someone who could have a really quick start in an EMBA program?
No, I would say you're similar to, I guess, some of the comments earlier. You're not going to regret it. I think I think there are these experiences are going to be, again, a bit cliche, but it's going to be what you put in is going to be what you get out. So I think if you're going to do it, I think you need to be willing to go in with your eyes open, having done the research on the program that's most applicable for you, but also be prepared to invest to
Mhm.
get out what you want to get out of it. I think everyone's different in maybe what they want to directly get out of it, but everyone is looking to gain something, whether or not it's knowledge, whether or not it's a wider lens, whether or not it's a new career, and have some clarity on what it is that you want to get out of it if you're going to do it. And I think the other piece we haven't really talked about, but is a consideration in today's world is, you do want to evaluate cost and how you want to take that into account for your household and how that's going to be managed. I think there are some companies that are willing to invest in helping you out with that piece, right? But if that is not available to you, what are the options that you can make available to you, and how will you have more options coming out of the program by making that investment? I had quite a few friends from my class that did the investment themselves, and that none of them, I don't think, have regretted making that investment. So I think just knowing all those pieces and having done that evaluation when you go in.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the price tags can scare a lot of people away, but I've, rarely met someone who didn't think it was worth it. Darren, what's your advice?
Piggybacking off the one keyword there, which is investment,
Yes.
clearly understanding that if you're going to invest so much into this, be very clear as what it is that you'd like out of it. In my case, I knew that I wanted to indulge my curiosities. But as Liz mentioned, for others, it may be from a career trajectory that they're looking to impact, but really have that clearly upfront exactly what that is, so that as you go in, you don't start second guessing your decision. because one thing that was quite obvious from the moment I began the program was that this is not something that you ever want to start and pause, and so aligning your being very intentful in what's the reason that's prompting you to do this, and then making sure that all your stakeholders are on board and that you're truly committed before you begin, so that you can relish in the pleasures of completing it or going through it.
True. Jacob, your words of advice or counsel?
Well, it's kind of odd, given the difference in experience in schools from Darren and Liz and myself. I really, their words speak to me, because I would give pretty much the exact same advice, and maybe in a slightly different way, but or reiterating some of the things that they've said, but definitely be thoughtful about what you're hoping to get out of the experience. Because I found that the people that were the most satisfied and that got the most out of it were they were deliberate about what they were hoping to get up front. Maybe that was increasing financial acumen, maybe that was expanding their professional networks, maybe it was getting access to additional resources for career development. But no matter what that was, they were thoughtful about it going into the program. And then I would add one thing to it: leave a little bit of room in there for serendipity, because as you've heard from the three of us today, maybe you go into it with one thing. And I know that a lot of people that enter these programs are very type A, very motivated, very structured people in some cases, but you also have to leave yourself a little bit of room for the unexpected to happen. And I think that often strikes a lot of people in these programs in a very pleasant way. So be thoughtful and upfront, but leave a little bit of room for the unexpected to happen. And then I wanted to touch on the financial investment too, because I think that's something that all of us, evaluate very closely going into it. I know I can speak for myself. I would say that it's probably the best ROI of anything that I've ever spent in my life. And I can think that if I don't get the return on investment from the experience that I had, then I would have no one to blame but myself, because I think going into it, that was a huge concern for me. And I even put some weight on different programs from that. But I think having gone through it, I would say that finding the right culture fit, the right experience, the right program layout that's compatible with you and your goals is far more important. And that over the course of the rest of your career, that you might be looking at 20 or 25 years of career left, that money will be insignificant, I think, over time. And I did pay for it myself. So I think that it's insignificant over the course of time versus the value that you get out of the program as a whole if you're there and you're intentional about your activity there.
Right. And it's one of the few times you can actually make an investment in yourself. I mean, if you think about your life and all the money you spend on whether it's a house or groceries and things like that, you rarely make an actual investment in yourself in life. And it's really one of the most generous things you could do for yourself, as all three of you have proven. So, hey, thank you so much for being part of this. Liz, Jacob, and Darren, really appreciate it. Loved your words and your insights. And for all of you out there, I want you to know that if you want to know more about these programs, go to the websites. There's a wealth of information on there, and follow the advice. Go and visit the program, sit in a class, have a coffee with some of the current classmates, maybe even talk to an alum of the program who's in the same field as you are in, and get a real battle report on what they went through, what they experienced, and whether you can imagine yourself in that same course and program. I think that's the way to make a nice, wise choice, and one that fits with your goals and your values and your personality. So once again, thanks for joining. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. You've been watching our Center Court session on how an executive MBA can advance your career.